If you were with us last July, you will have found out that there's three different ways Western New York can become independent. One is by becoming its own state, one is by being autonomous, and the third one is simply nullification. We didn't really know what nullification is, but there's a county in Western New York that may be leading the way on this, and we'll be speaking with one of the legislators who helped craft the resolution within moments on this week's State of Greater Western New York report, which is brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard. The Mendon Honeoye Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there, and welcome everyone to this week's version of the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, and with me today is Ginger Schroder. She is a legislator from the county of Cattaraugus County, which just last month voted to become a constitutional county. She's going to be telling us about that process, and also what it means for both her county and perhaps the rest of the Greater Western New York region. But first, let's just start out with having Ginger introduce herself. Ginger, tell us a little bit about what you do. You're not a full-time politician. You actually have a job, which is pretty interesting. Tell us about that.
Sure. Good afternoon. So as you noted, I'm a county legislator. That in our county is not a full-time job. It's approximately half a day a week. And for a living, I'm a full-time lawyer. And I also, with my husband, run an exotic poultry farm in Cattaraugus County.
That's great. The interesting thing is that it's representative of what you actually see within most of the Greater Western New York region. Is there anything, so just talking about within New York State, is there anything from a agricultural standpoint that really sticks out to you as an issue?
Well, I know that we're in the dairy belt here, and our farmers are struggling greatly, and because New York is not a very friendly place for any business to do business, our farmers are having a rough time of it. Recently, because as part of my duties as a Cattaraugus County legislator, I sit on the Industrial Development Agency, and we had a company come in that's going to help our agricultural business here in our county quite a bit. And they were describing the different places in the U.S. that they do business, and it was pretty amazing to hear how other states just kind of roll out the red carpet, and we roll out the red tape here in New York. So I'm glad they're sticking with us, but we have some challenges here, particularly with agriculture.
Very good. So let's get right into the story of Constitutional County. This didn't come from a top-down sort of approach. This really percolated up from concerned citizens. Tell us a little bit about how it started and how you eventually got word of what was going on.
Sure. So it was very interesting. Often in our legislature, items that we work on are self-generated by legislators, but on occasion we do get contact from our constituents who want to see something happen, and then we do our level best to see that it kind of gets through the legislature. In this case, Cattaraugus County, I think, since the beginning of the COVID pandemic, we haven't had a huge experience with it. Our rates have been very low for infection. We tend to socially distance for a living out here. We only have 77,000 people in our county. And when you enter our neck of the woods, one of the first big signs you see on the main thoroughfare coming into our county is a very large sign that the Kless brothers, who are great patriots, put up, and it says, if you're seeing this, you're now free. So that kind of signifies the mindset, so to speak, of a good majority of the residents here in Cattaraugus County who just don't really take to government interference in their lives and tend to be more conservative, probably than some of the more urban areas. So I received a phone call from a woman by the name of Brenda Hansen. She told me that she had been lucky enough to find a group of like-minded people. They were meeting regularly. They were discussing all of what they perceived to be the government overreaches with respect to the pandemic, from the masking of children, the shutdown of the schools, the inability to assemble. She belonged to a church, and they were having a difficult time with the restrictions that the governor had placed on their ability to worship together as a congregation. And all of those people were looking for ways to have our county government try to step up and help them. And she had indicated that she'd heard about this constitutional county possibility. She called it a sanctuary. We were a bit uncomfortable with that terminology. So eventually we got to a place where she suggested some ideas to us. I did some research. I went out and found other counties that had done similar kind of things. And then I kind of just did research and found the best of the best and put together a resolution. And she and I, it was really a nice bilateral arrangement between she and I, a constituent and a legislator. She and I went back and forth, and we were able to kind of craft what we felt was a good piece of legislation, this resolution, and I then tried to shop it to my legislators. So it was a nice process.
So tell us a little bit more about the grassroots group in particular. Was it just people within the church, or were they able to reach out beyond that constituency and bring regular, say, ordinary people in on this process? And maybe if you can tell us a little bit about what it felt from their standpoint. Again, ordinary people who are actually making a difference in government. How did that work?
So actually they did reach well beyond the confines of their church. That was kind of just used, I think, as a springboard for organizing their group, and that was where physically they met on Tuesday evenings. I want to say, once every few weeks. They managed to actually draw in individuals from all over the county. They also connected with another group, another like-minded group out of a city in our county, the city of Olean, and that group was called the Right Thinkers. So they kind of joined forces, and they were, I think, having very similar concerns about what they were seeing coming out with the mandates out of Albany. You're obviously very familiar with the state being in it. I've been talking to people because of this all over the United States, which I guess we can talk about later. And it was amazing to me, really, how much more autocratic our state was in its approach towards the pandemic. And those are the kind of concerns these individuals were talking about. And frankly, they were very frustrated because they didn't know how it was that they could fight back other than practicing civil disobedience, which I think they tried to do in their own way. But I think they wanted some legitimacy to that effort, and they saw contacting their county legislature as a possible way to add legitimacy and to add some sort of oomph to their movement. And that's kind of how it got started. It was probably a group of about 50, 60 people started this, and it was, again, completely their idea to try to petition their government, which is really what we should be doing when we feel that the government is kind of going astray.
Do you know if they tried contacting the state representatives at all? I know that might be less likely to be successful, just given the how the state is made up. But do you know if they tried that at all, or did they just go immediately to the county?
No, they did. Actually, a few of the group had very good relationships with our senator, which is Senator George Borrello, who's himself a great patriot. He is constantly fighting in Albany for what he perceives to be the abuses being handed out to his district, rural Western New York. So he is quite a fighter. Unfortunately, he's fighting a very uphill battle in Albany. No matter what he tries to introduce legislation or speak to the excesses of government, that voice is a bit drowned out by what I perceive to be a very progressive liberal left that has abrogated their duties towards their own constituency, and for a significant period of time during the pandemic gave 100% authority to an autocrat in our Governor Cuomo, who now has, of course, has been disgraced and has left office and has been replaced, unfortunately, with another governor very similarly to him. So they had reached out to George. They reached out to Joe Giglio, who's also a state representative. And I think that they just felt that there was really nothing that could be done at the state level, because one or two lawmakers in Albany are not going to turn around kind of a groundswell of movement that's being carried by essentially downstate and mid-state New York. So I think that's where they decided, well, maybe we better start local and see what we can do here. Think big, but act immediately small was, I think, their concept.
So how about from your perception now? This is coming to you. You may have had some. I guess what I'm wondering is, when did you first hear about it, and what was your immediate impression upon first hearing about it? Did you think this was a wild idea, or did you say, let me look into this?
That's a good question. I'll tell you that earlier in the year, when we first took office and that by we, I mean the current legislature, we have 4-year terms, and we took office in January of 2020. I think we had some very big ideas for what we were going to try to accomplish for the county. And as you know, shortly thereafter in March, we kind of got blindsided by the COVID pandemic and all of that, everything that was meant through that. Sometime in January of 2021, right before we were trying to gear up for the year, a fellow legislator and I had discussed the concept of a Second Amendment sanctuary county. That was kind of our own idea, and we bandied it back and forth, and we were hearing about other things occurring around the country, and we thought we might be able to kind of piggyback on that. And sure enough, we got derailed from thinking about that. And I think the reason that we had thought of that in the first place is because we were hearing inklings out of the feds that they were going to be trying to do things about gun control. And if you know anything about Cattaraugus County, the residents here love their firearms. They're avid hunters. They believe in the Second Amendment and their right to protect their household. We live in a very rural environment where sometimes you're the only house within a mile or two. And when you call 911, you can fully expect it can take up to a half an hour for a police officer, whether it be the state troopers or the sheriff, to reach you. So people here have learned to rely on themselves, and they really like that they're able to protect their homes and their families with firearms. So we talked about it, and then we got derailed. So we just put it on the back shelf. So when Brenda first contacted me and said, look, we've been thinking about this. We've heard about it elsewhere. What do you think about it? It made me remember the fact that we had thought about at least a Second Amendment sanctuary county. And then we just talked about broadening it to this idea that it really wasn't just about firearms and the Second Amendment and the ability of us to protect ourselves as citizens. It really had gone during the pandemic to a whole new level of government intrusion on the private lives of citizens, in the right to assembly, the right to free speech, the whole vaccine mandates that are now being rolled out, the due process violations that are taking place with respect to property rights, with the eviction moratoriums for property owners. I mean, it just kept seeming like the list was growing, and it was like changing a tire on a car rolling downhill to try to keep up with it all. And I think it was that frustration that caused her to reach out and to see if there was something that we as a county legislature were willing to do to address it.
Excellent. We'll be back right in a moment after this word, but let's remind everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, we also have a couple of questions that I'll get to after the break. Just put them in the chat, or you could put them in the question and answer on the call. So we'll be right back with Ginger after this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths, until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
Welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York Report. I'm Chris Carosa, and with me today is Ginger Schroder. She's a county legislator from Cattaraugus County, which in August voted to become a constitutional county. We're going to talk about that process now, actually how the sausage was made with regard to that. And we actually had a question from a member of the audience who wanted to know about the makeup of your county government. Is it all Republican? Is there a split? What party is the county executive or whoever the county leader is, administrator? How set the stage that way so we kind of get a feel from a political standpoint how everything is set up.
Sure. So as I mentioned on the earlier part of the show, we're a relatively small county population-wise. We have 77,000 residents approximately. The county is quite sizable, however, so we're divided into districts, and we have 17 legislators who are elected from the constituency of those districts. Most districts have 2 legislators. The larger city one has 3, which is the city of Albany. We are historically it has always been a Republican majority in the legislature that I can recall. Up until 2020, when we were elected into office, there was a 12-5 split, 12 Republican legislators, 5 Democrats. In 2020, there was quite a groundswell, and we were able to elect 16 out of the 17 legislators from the Republican Party. And the one Democratic legislator we have, Dave Cook, he's out of Salamanca. And Salamanca tends to elect conservative Democrats, so I would call actually Dave a fairly conservative Democrat, because when the time came to vote on this resolution, he voted with us. So it was a unanimous, unanimous vote of the legislators who were present that day.
That was going to be my question. If you had unanimity among the legislatures, it sounds like you did, which is actually a great sign, because the issues that face the Greater Western New York region really aren't party-based issues, although some people will try to frame them that way. They're really Western New York citizen-based issues. So tell us now the actual process of passing the resolution. How long did it take you to do the research you talked about earlier? And how many different legislators were involved? Was it the whole legislature, or was there a subcommittee? How did that work?
So that's an excellent question. It kind of exposes the skeleton of how legislation gets formed at the county level. I would say probably in late June is when Brenda had reached out to me, and I started rethinking this issue of how I could turn the Second Amendment sanctuary resolution that I had worked on with Joe Snyder out of Olean into a more of a comprehensive constitutional issue. Because, I think you're right. Personal freedom and the Constitution should not stop at party lines. Everyone should be concerned about their personal freedom. Everyone should be concerned about government overreach. So in our county, we have a committee process, and so I drafted a resolution. I looked for all different, types of input from other counties that I had heard had done similar things. I looked at their legislation. I talked to our county attorney, whose name is Ashley Milliman. And I did the first draft. I sent it to her. She redrafted it. I sent it to Brenda, the grassroots leader. She had some suggestions for it. In fact, frankly, there was a portion where she was the one who had noticed that our county mission statement didn't quite comport with the ideals of a constitutional county. And so she suggested some changes to that, and we worked on that. That whole process took about 2 to 3 weeks. And then I felt it was ready to go to what we call committee. All of the work of the county is done through the committee process. So we have a labor committee, a county operations committee, a finance committee, and the like. And the legislators, various legislators, staff these committees, both as chairs, vice chairs, and then committee members. And when we want to pass a piece of legislation, whatever that legislation relates to, it goes to the most appropriate committee for review and input. And if it passes committee, then it gets put to the whole legislature for a vote. If you want to do an immediate, which means you want to bypass the committee process, you need 12 legislators. And if you want to go through the committee process and it passes through committees, you only need 9. So that would be a simple majority out of our 17 is 9. A super majority that you'd need for an immediate resolution is 12. I just didn't really know. I felt like I had like-minded legislators. I felt like I knew them fairly well, but I thought it would be safer to go through the committee process and get input so that everyone would have buy-in to this concept and everyone would have felt like they had input, rather than push it through like an immediate and bypass the committee process. So I put it through committees. The only committee it really needed to be assigned to was the Finance Committee, because it doesn't really impact our employee relations. It doesn't impact Health and Human Services. It really was about county operations. And so the Finance Committee then takes a look at anything that deals with that, looking at what cost it may have for the county. It passed that committee with flying colors and was ready to go to resolution on August 25th to the floor of the legislature. And I sent it out beforehand to legislators and made sure that they were good with the language. I got a couple suggestions. I got one suggestion from our our sole Democrat on the legislature, and I actually incorporated it because I thought it was a good suggestion about how we're a nation of laws and we deal with courts. And so he wanted to see something towards the end of the resolution that recognized that when we challenge things as unconstitutional, it was likely going to go through a court-like process. And that was very important to me too, because I saw coming down the pike this vaccination mandate issue. And since our county has a significant portion of the population that is unvaccinated from COVID-19 by choice, I saw people's potential livelihoods being threatened, and I wanted to know that I was going to have the support of the legislature if we were going to challenge that in court and perhaps sue the state or other entities that were trying to encroach upon our citizens' rights. So after it got the committee process, it was ready for the floor. That day, we had about 75, 80 people from the community, including the We the People group, the grassroots group, show up at the legislature to see this get passed. And it was really, it was a very profound moment. I mean, I have to say, I had some legislators tell me afterwards it was one of the proudest moments they'd ever had. They had served multiple terms on the legislature, whereas I was a freshman, a new legislator, and they said it was one of the proudest moments they ever had. We presented the resolution. It was read out loud to the entire grouping of people that were there. And then we took a vote, a roll call vote. We were allowed to make comments. So I stood up and told people what the Constitution meant to me and why this resolution I saw as a statement of position, a statement of philosophy that I wanted the county to adopt. Another legislator named Andy Burr out of Gowanda stood up, and he also made some comments about what he saw as to be the unconstitutional actions coming out of Albany, particularly with the mandate for not having evictions, having an eviction moratorium, and how that had been overturned in the courts is unconstitutional, but it had taken 16 months. And then we put it to the vote, and the roll call vote was all 17 in favor of that that resolution. So it was quite extraordinary.
You know what's fascinating about this story is that really you went from 0 to 60 in 2 months, 0 to passing the resolution in just 2 months. That's fast. That's good, and it's a very good resolution. I've read it. In fact, you could read it too, if you're not right now live, but we'll post this on our site, on our archive site, and you will be able to read a copy of that resolution so that you can see. I know that you've got to go because you've got a job to do, but I wanted to know if you can quickly answer the kind of response that you've got from, in particular, we'll acknowledge that you've got national coverage. I saw you on Epic TV. That's how I found out about you. And you've got other counties across the nation talking to you. I'm particularly interested in the response you got from Western New York counties, especially since last night, Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns told us that she heard of what she'd done from people who live in Livingston County. So there's another county that might potentially be interested in doing this. What have you heard from the Western New York folks?
So I'm going to tell you the counties I've heard from, and I maybe I consider, because I'm down really in the southern tier, I consider kind of our end of the state to be more copacetic. So just focusing on the counties that I can recall right now that I've heard from, grassroots or legislators from Yates, Onondaga, Livingston, Niagara. I've heard from Erie County, Chautauqua County, Oneida County, and Monroe County are the ones that I can recall right now. And I have heard significantly from downstate as well. And as you mentioned, I mean, I've probably received over 300 contacts. They continue to come in every day. Those are in addition to the contacts that are occurring at the county legislative office level, where yesterday when we had legislature, we had our committee meeting night. I was told by the administrative assistant for the chairman of the legislature that she is spending a significant amount of time on the phone with people calling from all over the United States, wanting copies of the resolution and, you know, wanting to talk about how that process unfolded. So I can't even keep up with the texts, the calls, emails to 3 different addresses through my company law firm website, LinkedIn, Facebook, instant message. It's astounding and gratifying to see that there's still so many patriots left in the United States, and that people are looking. I mean, they're just frustrated, and they're frightened, and they're looking for a way to try to address, address the governmental overreach that's taking hold of our lives in a very real way.
Is there a way, and this is a question that's coming from the audience, is there a way that people can maybe learn more about this? Do you have a website, or does Brenda have something? And I don't remember her last name, so I don't know her personally. But is there something that people could go to that we could maybe also include in the text of our archive that we could point to people, or should I talk to Brenda?
So I don't have a website that. Yeah, I don't have a website that addresses any of this. I mean, like I said, it was a legislative thing, so certainly the resolution itself is, I believe, on our Cattaraugus County website. I've been talking to people to the extent I can. I literally could spend every day for the past week, the entire day, just talking to people, emailing, texting, etc. And obviously, I run a farm, and I'm a lawyer, and I'm a legislator, so I've had an awful lot that I've had to do, so I've not been able to spend as much time with people as I'd like. I'm certainly willing, if people are willing to wait, to try to call back everyone I can, and when I'm in the car, to talk to them about, you know, how it is they can do what they can do. But if they want to email me, emailing me at my Cattaraugus County email, I can certainly give them some insight. I have an email kind of that I've prepared to send out to people, so I'm happy to send that out. It's gdschroder@catco.org.
That's catco, CATTCO.org. I'll post that also on the archive site. So we had one final question very quickly. Do you have a county executive, or are you just a legislative body? And does that county executive need to sign off on resolution?
We don't have an elected county executive. We are the legislators, and we have a county administrator who is our person who, you know, helps us as clerk of the legislature. But He does not sign off on any legislation. He guides the administrative processes of the county.
Excellent, excellent. This is very good information, and I'm sure, just by judging from the audience response, we're going to want to talk to you some more, maybe in a more open kind of forum situation, just to learn about this and maybe some of the other people involved. So, Ginger, thank you very much for being here. And just want to remind everybody, we show this show, State of Greater Western New York, every week. It's live, and if it's live, you can, and you are a member of the audience, you can ask questions just like the audience members did today by just going to this website and signing up to get your free audience invitation. So with that, I want to thank Ginger one more time, and thank you all for listening and participating in today's show. And with that, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.